Several months after shifting their grant strategy, BrightPath Community Initiative observed a notable change in their fundraising activity. The reduction in applications was not the result of disengagement or resource constraints. Rather, it reflected a more defined understanding of how their funding environment actually functioned. In that context, the absence of constant application activity no longer felt uncertain. It felt structured. Maya Cruz and Leo Santos were no longer operating under continuous deadline pressure. With fewer immediate submissions underway, the organization had space to evaluate its approach at a systems level. The focus shifted from individual proposal outcomes to broader funding behavior and decision patterns.
We initially assumed the issue was in how we were writing proposals.
But over time, it became clear it wasn't only about writing.
With distance from the day-to-day application cycle, the team began to recognize a broader reality of grant funding. Grant-making is not simply a collection of independent opportunities. It operates as a structured ecosystem shaped by funding priorities, eligibility filters, and institutional selection behavior. Organizations that perform consistently within this ecosystem are often not necessarily applying more frequently, but operating with a clearer understanding of alignment and positioning from the outset. This shift naturally reframed how success was defined. Previously, success was often associated with output volume, number of applications submitted, deadlines met, and activity sustained. Over time, that definition evolved toward more strategic indicators: clarity of fit, strength of alignment, and intentionality in submission decisions.
It became less about how many opportunities we could pursue,
and more about how deliberately we chose which ones to pursue.
Importantly, BrightPath did not alter its mission or programmatic focus. The primary change occurred within its funding strategy. Each opportunity was now assessed through a more structured evaluation process prior to proposal development. Decision-making incorporated alignment review, historical funding patterns, and realistic competitiveness within each funding context. Application timing was also adjusted to allow greater spacing between submissions, enabling more thorough preparation and review. The objective was not to reduce ambition, but to improve allocation of effort. Through this process, the team developed a more informed view of how grant funding decisions are made. While individual calls for proposals often emphasize eligibility criteria, the broader system includes additional layers: funding priorities, strategic focus areas, geographic and sector targeting, and historical award patterns. These elements are not always explicit in application guidelines, but they significantly influence selection outcomes. Recognizing these patterns allows organizations to move from reactive application behavior to more strategic engagement with funders. As this understanding developed, the internal experience of the team also shifted. Decision-making became more deliberate, planning cycles became more structured, and the sense of urgency tied to individual deadlines gradually decreased. The work itself did not become simpler, but it became more interpretable.
We no longer feel like we're constantly reacting.
We're working with more clarity around where our efforts actually belong.
Grant application burnout is not always the result of insufficient effort or capability. In many cases, it reflects sustained activity without sufficient understanding of underlying funding structures and selection dynamics. When organizations step back from volume-driven application cycles, patterns often become more visible. What once appeared as unpredictable outcomes begins to reflect consistent decision frameworks within the funding landscape. And within that clarity, the cycle of burnout often begins to break, not through reduced ambition, but through improved strategic alignment. In nonprofit grant strategy, the most meaningful shift is not always in how much is applied for. It is in how clearly an organization understands what is worth pursuing in the first place.